area. I thought she got the ball.
Hello, good evening, Spurs fans. This is going to be your weekly Tuesday panel show, joined by Dave, myself, and Sam. Sean should be joining us. No Johnny this week, but we do have plenty to talk about. Mohammed Kudus is the breaking news for us this week. We'll be talking about him as potentially the successor to Sonny, because those rumors haven't necessarily gone away. We haven't been given any clarity on his future. And Spurs, we know, need to make a big marquee signing, especially in Dave and I's opinion, in that front line, and Mohammed Kudus could be that one. I know plenty of us were hoping for an Eze. Plenty of us might have been hoping for a Semenyo, perhaps someone else. That will be part of our discussion tonight. Are you a bit let down? Do you feel like this is a drop-off in quality from some of the original rumors that we might have been taking a look at? And we'll be discussing some other things as well regarding Mohammed Kudus, Spurs' spending, just transfer plans in general, and also kind of what we've been talking about a lot this summer, which is Spurs kind of just a bit behind, it feels like, the rest of the clubs, you know, in the Premier League in terms of making the moves. But we have 3 at the moment, so we'll have plenty of time for discussion, plenty of time to get all our opinions out there. And also, as always, everybody, feel free to give us yours in the live chat, in the comments. Smash the like button if you're already in here nice and early. And if you did want to stop us at any point, if you want to get yourself in the conversation, make sure that we hear you out on your opinion. Welcome to support the channel with the super chat as well. And thank you to all the members that I'm already seeing in the house. I'm seeing AK Shags, Shawnee in here saying Sam out. No to Ben Davis. Stevie Frazier, he's got plenty of good opinions on Mohammed Kudus. He's not too happy with it. And then we see Soren. Good to see you, Soren. Long time no see. As well as Adrian Stroka, Spurs diehards, absolute legend, and also great channel. And Rain Man joining us. Good to see you all. But without further ado, everybody, anybody who's watching this back, want to make the best use of your time, and we'll get this show underway. Talks between Mohammed Kudus and Tottenham and the project/personal terms are underway. There's been a positive approach, according to Fabrizio Romano. Kudus is open to joining Spurs while talks continue with both the player and West Ham sides. 2 other clubs, though, are still in the race. We'll go to you first, Sam. Is Kudus, for you, a bit of a letdown, a bit of a drop-off from maybe the original people that we might have been linked with, the likes of Eze and Semenyo? Does this feel like a bit of a letdown?
I don't know. I'm quite on board the signing. I mean, like before he went
is he
to West
worse
Ham,
than Eze or Semenyo, or is he around the same level?
So I put out a sort of, I don't know, I was pretty bored at work today while I was drowning in my own sweat. And I put out a sort of tweet about, I'd seen a lot of people on Twitter saying with Eze, like they were gutted, etc. And like, you know, the club, like F the club and whatever, you know, classic, you know, Tuesday morning meltdown, right? And then I just thought about it for a bit, and I was like, you know what? Like, I'm actually not that sad. I'm sad because I really like Eze as a person and as a player. And I also don't want to see him go to Arsenal if that's where he ends up. But at the same time, I personally don't think that Eze is the most important signing for us to make in terms of the kind of profile that he is. I don't mean, when I say profile, I don't mean like, you know, top class. Well, I mean like in terms of the position that he finds himself in on the pitch. And I think that, you know, you might have your opinions on James Maddison, whether you think that he's good enough or whether you think Kulusevski is good enough, depending on who Frank decides to go with. But for me, I just think that it's not that big a priority. And I feel like I know my club is not going to be the type of club that goes out there and spends 60 million on an Eze and then 60 million on another, you know, Eze level or higher. I just can't see the club ever dropping that much money. So for better phrase, to spunk all the cash on Eze, when I don't feel like that's the most important position that we need to address, for me is a mistake, as much as I like Eze. But then on Kudus, like in his first season in the Prem, he was really good. Like really good, fit in very well, you know, was probably on a lot of people's wish lists for last summer. Not just Spurs fans, I'm talking about like around the Premier League. I think that a lot of Spurs fans are letting the the let's say seeing red moment, the hot-headed moment that he had at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium when he, slapped Mickey van der Ven, slapped Sarr, pushed players over, hit Richarlison. And I think that they're allowing that to mar what it is, like what kind of player Kudus could be for us. And I think that, at the end of the day, I like the idea that I don't want him to be doing that if he comes to us, right? But I like the passion that he was showing, that in that moment, it meant so much to him, even if it meant nothing ultimately, that he saw red and lost his head. I know that's a positive spin to look at it on, but in the sunshine, why not be positive? So yeah, on the whole, I'm pretty happy with Kudus if that's the way that we go.
It was a great rhyme as well in terms of he saw red and lost his head. Is he even West Ham's best player, though? Because Jared Bowen, right, has produced pretty good numbers for that West Ham team, despite them having a pretty roller coaster season with Lopetegui not working out. Graham Potter, in my opinion, is kind of someone that could be on the chopping block maybe earlier than others in terms of the manager department this next season. Yet Jared Bowen has somehow still, kind of maintained some pretty decent numbers, whereas Kudus, almost like Paqueta and maybe some other players in that West Ham team, saw a real drop off there. Like it's not like he really picked up, from his first season.
Well, I think that Kudus kind of maybe falls into a trap of being so versatile. Now, I can't confess to have watched West Ham religiously, but I feel like Kudus is often deployed like all over the place. I was looking at his transfer market earlier on just to see what kind of positions he was, and it's like almost double figures of positions over the last 2 years in basically every position in front of the midfield, which for us is obviously a good thing, but for him, it means that he can't flourish in his best position. I saw a stat that in the 19 games that he's played at right wing for West Ham, he's got 11 GA. Well, that's a very good return, right? I know that that's overlooking the other games, but I was looking at, I can't remember the exact stats that it was, but it was something like Kudus had 10 less goals in the Premier League than Brennan Johnson in 40 less games, because that was the stick that was being kind of beaten at me when I was saying that I liked Kudus, was that he doesn't even do Johnson's numbers. But in terms of goals in the Premier League, he actually does do Johnson's numbers. And I think we all kind of agree in terms of us on the panel, I can't speak for everyone out there, that Brennan could be a better player. He could be upgraded, but he could also be a better player himself if he actually learns how to take his man on. Whereas I feel like it potentially is easier for Kudus to get to the back stick than it is for Brennan Johnson to learn how to beat a fullback.
Yeah. No, he has more, I think, versatility in terms of he can take it past players. I do think he has creativity in his game, and he has shown that he can score really great goals. But, can he score consistently, I guess, is a big question mark with Kudus. And we'll find out if he does end up coming to a club like Spurs. AK Shags, though, Dave, saying 60 million feels like a lot for Kudus. We were probably going to be paying around a similar amount for Eze. I think it would have been done in installments. Semenyo is around like 65 million pounds at least, according to some sources, with Bournemouth. So why is it that they're settling on Eze and on Kudus? Is Kudus a bit of a drop off from Eze Semenyo, especially if we are to pay around 60 million?
Yeah, because it's a bit of a weird situation, right? Because we're led to believe you can get Eze out of Palace for 60 million over 3 installments. So it's a bit of a weird situation. I can't say I'd have any insight or any sort of logical thinking around why Tottenham wouldn't go and strike that deal with Eze. Because to be brutally honest with you, Eze is a more ready-to-go, far superior player. Yeah. What I like about Eze, Jack, and I was explaining this to you earlier on off screen, that when I watch the England international games, it's almost like the players you see in the Premier League almost turn up to England and a lot of them end up playing safe. Whereas Eze has never lost that when he's made his appearances for England. What I like about Eze is, sometimes he doesn't need to take a touch and lay it off. He can just flick it around the corner accurately and keep moves flowing. And he creates problems, create chances. So I really like Eze, and big up Shawnee. And he's got all, the numbers match under Ollie Glasner as well. Them numbers match with Eze, and he's a player that could walk straight into Tottenham, straight into the first 11, and he would start producing for Tottenham. And ultimately, that's what we need, because Thomas Frank is going to bring the defensive solidity that we've missed. But last season, I know we have, look how many goals we scored, but how many of them were over a certain period when you're slapping up a couple of teams back to back by 3 or 4 goals, and then you go on that barren run? Consistency over the course of the season is what matters. And for me, players like Eze would drag you to that level. He'll also help get more out of the likes of Solanke and other players around him. So for me, I don't understand why we're not straight and get that one done and dusted. We should have had that one. He shouldn't still be on the market today. We should have that one sewn up now. It's an easy one to do. He's with CAA base. He wants to stay in London. Palace, Tottenham, not too much of a difference, and stuff like that. So for me, why not? It makes perfect sense, to make that move, and for Tottenham to make that move. When it comes to Kudus, it feels like Eze is now no longer on the table. And the reason why we're going for Kudus is because, we may pay 60 million. But West Ham, we're going to structure that in a deal that's favourable for Tottenham. I think West Ham are looking to offload one of their players for big money to sort of alleviate PSR concerns and stuff like that. Yeah. So we'll probably get a deal that's more tailored to us in the way we want to pay it in installments and stuff like that. It'll probably be a deal where it's like we may pay 45 and then it'll be another 15 in add-ons and shit like that. But when it comes to Kudus as a player, again, what I like about Kudus, what I actually think we lack in this team, is that Maverick. That unpredictability, someone that can get on the ball, take 2-3 players on, and burst through a line and lay something on for others. We missed that in that Tottenham team last season. Everything was pass. We're screaming at it. Someone get on the fucking ball, drive at your man and take him on. We missed that last season, even through the middle at times. As soon as Kulusevski got injured, we lacked that. And that's where you become very predictable and very easy to sort of shut down and shut out. So you need that unpredictability that Kudus brings. A guy that can just get on the ball and just fucking go. Not only that, he has that spectacular goal in him. He's a guy that does rise his game for the bigger games as well, I've noticed. So for me, I think there is a lot of pluses with Kudus. Stevie speaks about, he says here, down tools when he's unhappy and stuff like that. And I understand that. But Mavericks in football have always been that sort of personality to a large degree. Gascoigne was a personality like that. You got to take the bad with the good. Cantona at Man United, stuff like that. Big players, Mavericks like that have always been that case. And you do need one or two of them players, or you need a manager that knows that, everyone else has to fall in line, but this guy, I've got to give him rope and I have to make everyone else understand why. And I think he's of that ilk. Now, where the question actually comes in around Kudus is his actual output. And that's a big difference between him and Eze. Eze's numbers are ready to go now walk into this Tottenham team. We're hoping that Kudus can actually drag his numbers
pick on from here
to double digits on both goals and assists, because essentially that's what you need to produce at a club like Tottenham Hotspur. But my hope is it's not just a punt that you could go into your local bookies and make, that it's an actual educational punt with data, analytics, good football and solid opinions who have made decisions like this before and have a history of getting it right, actually involved in this decision before we actually go and sanction it. But Sam also mentioned something when he was speaking there, Jack, about if we were to sign Eze, that he's not going to be that sort of, because of the position he prefers through the middle, it's not really going to be that transformative signing. To a degree, I understand what he means. But it was never going to be like, we need an Eze type player, and we also need another player of the same ilk out on a wide position that can do a job out there. Not one player is just going to come in and all of a sudden transform our attack and have players springing off him. You need a couple of pieces of the puzzle. So for me, it's never, if you sign Eze or Kudus, you need to follow that up with another one of a similar ilk. It's not just going to be one player that's going to solve that issue.
Sean, like the question I've been asking everybody to begin with is, does this feel like a bit of a let off or a bit of a drop off from maybe the original people we were linked to it, that we got excited by Eze, Semenyo, these sort of type of players? Is Kudus maybe just a step below them?
I'm not sure. No, I don't think he is. I think he is in the eyes of Spurs fans. Just quickly, I'm so sorry I'm late, guys. Bugsy dislocated. I think she dislocated.
You're a busy man the last few days.
You only joined. Yeah, we're still on the first question, right on time.
No, okay, cool. I was out with the dog, and on the first throw of the ball, she came back with a paw up, and I think she dislocated. I caught it on the camera. I think she dislocated her wrist or something. So I've had nightmares for the poor doggy. But apologies for being late. I love you guys all. Love all you guys. And the question in returns. In regards of
Kudus. See a drop off in terms of quality compared to the others that we've been linked with, Semenyo, Eze, for example.
So I think that here's what I would say, right? A little bit, sort of zoom out a little bit to the 30,000 foot view. I think a lot of Tottenham fans are going to judge players on one of or several of these criteria. One is what West Ham fans are saying about Kudus very recently. Two is the fact that they think that Eberechi Eze is a Tottenham player for some reason, and that that there's some sort of like he's one of our own, even though he's not. Three is that Semenyo is massively overpriced, and in so doing, they think that price equals value. And I think that those three things are all very misleading. If you look at Kudus's stats of last season, he will disappoint on FB refs against any of the three criteria. You can pick, like, there's very rarely that you'll find a player on FB refs where you can click on versus midfielders, versus attacking midfielders or wide men versus forwards. It's usually one or two, right? The fact of the matter is that he played like 30 games last season and he basically distributed his time like 35-40% between the two wing spots, 25% as an attacking midfielder, and then 10% and 10% as either a second striker, a forward, or an 8. And in so doing, when you look at those various different categories of how you look at him, you're going to see basically mid-bar, 50% on everything, because in 50% of the games, he's being, in one set of data, he's being asked, but in one set of 100% of his data minutes, he's being asked to do certain things as a midfielder that he's not asked to do as a forward, and vice versa. And the same with a winger. And so in so doing, he's getting compared to everybody in those three different buckets that do those things 100% of the time. So you're going to see, if you click on the midfield stats, you're going to see an outperformance of the offensive stats. Yeah. If you click on the forward stats, you're going to see an outperformance in the defensive stats, because that's what he's being asked to do. But overall, he looks like he's medium tier at everything.
Sam said he's a victim of his own versatility, of his own, ability to play in different positions.
100%, right? He's also the victim of having to figure out two different managers in a year that play different systems, that have asked him to play in all those different positions. And then West Ham fans are sort of looking at that guy and thinking he's unhappy and therefore he's a bad apple. I would remind everybody who was last year criticizing Brennan Johnson in all of our different various streams that we go on, who was saying that, oh, I'm not saying that you should be going and buying like a Mo Salah, because we're not going to be able to get him. But there are players out there that we could have got for less money than we spent on Brennan Johnson, who are now currently playing for weaker teams than Tottenham Hotspur. We could have got them. And the obvious go-to answer was Mohammed Kudus. All of a sudden, we can get Mohammed Kudus, and now no one wants Mohammed Kudus anymore. Right? It's just the way the Tottenham fans are, right? I want what I don't have, but as soon as I can have what I didn't have, I don't want him anymore. I want someone better. It's the way it is. I also think that Eze is getting like the smoke blown up his ass by everyone. He's a wonderful player, don't get me wrong, but I don't think he's the player that we necessarily need. We don't need a player that can be... Sorry.
No. I was actually going to bring up a comment on exactly that point. Rainman saying, I don't think we even need another 10 like Eze. Are Kudus and Eze different positions or different types of players?
Yeah. So for me, Eze is a 10 that starts on the left and drifts in. Simmons is a 10 that sometimes starts on the left and drifts in, or sometimes they start as a 10 and drift out to the left. Now, it all depends on what the intentions are for Sonny, and obviously with Matisse Tell. I don't know. We don't know yet what we're looking to work with under a Frank system, whether we're going to be doing more inside forwards rather than wingers, traditional wingers. But Eze certainly isn't a traditional winger. Mohammed Kudus is. Doesn't matter what stat you look at, under what gauge or what comparison you're using. His successful take-ons are insane, even in a poor West Ham system. Sorry,
that is his best attribute. Is like Dave and I, even during watch-alongs, complained that no one could get the ball off this guy. Even when we were trying to take him out, he still would just ride challenge after challenge. That does seem to be his best attribute.
He's incredible at it. Sorry, Dave.
Would you not argue that Eze is as versatile as Kudus? Eze has played out well before, and he could do a job, all across the front line in terms of through the middle, out wide. I think it speaks volume. Huh?
Not off the right, as they can't play off the right.
I'd argue a player of his ability can.
Well, he never has.
I think he's good enough. I think he's a good enough player to play anywhere across that front line. I think he is a similar mode of Kudus.
You might be right.
A Maverick.
Yeah, maybe 100%. By the way, I'm not in. I always get like all year. Like I spent so much time with Johnny, and Johnny's like he sort of blows smoke up the backside of Eze. And when I go, hang on a second, mate, let's just calm down a little bit here. This is why blah blah blah. Johnny then and other people think that I'm saying that Eze, I don't want Eze, or I don't like Eze, or that I think Eze is washed. I don't. I think the guy's absolutely insane. I think he's sensational. I think he'd be a boon and a benefit to any team that he walks into. I just don't think that he necessarily. I think that him going to Arsenal, if you take your Tottenham hat off for a second, I think it makes much more sense that he goes to Arsenal, because Arsenal don't have a big time player in the 10 that is reliable in the big games like Odegaard. Odegaard is he goes missing in all of the big games. Tottenham Hotspur.
I don't think he's going to Arsenal to play 10. I think Arsenal are signing him to play off that left. It's their biggest area weakness in their attack.
It's an option though, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Personally, I think that Eze is slightly better than Trossard and not as good as a winger as Martinelli is, as in a winger in a traditional winger. It all depends on how you're going to use them. But I think that what he gets in, what Arsenal get in Eze, is an option to play off the left, but also to be a better option and probably a marked improvement on a guy that doesn't have any competition at all for his spot in Odegaard. What I think you're walking into if you sign Eze at Tottenham, it all depends on what happens with Sonny. It all depends on what happens with Solomon and with a few other players. But let's assume that there's space in the squad regardless. You're not going to be able to sell Maddison and you're not going to be able to sell Kulusevski because both of them are injured. For me, I think that you're walking into a nightmare headache situation where you're not going to be able to keep 3 players happy, all of whom are sometimes shoehorned into different positions. But ultimately,
right?
Not really when you have a limited budget. Right? If budget was no issue, of course you want Eze in your team. But if you only have 100 million quid to spend, what's the priority? For me, the priority is a better winger that can do what wingers need to do, a better 6 that can do what a 6 needs to do. And Bentancur isn't that guy. As much as many people think he did a good job, he's not a good 6. He's an 8 that was shoehorned into a 6. He doesn't have the 6 natural 6 tendencies. And I think that you need somebody who can provide goal like output that's reliable. And so for me, as much as I think that Eze is a better player than Mohammed Kudus, I think when you factor all of those things in that I've just mentioned, again, and the unknowns are how they're going to be used in what system, I think that people are massively underselling Mohammed Kudus. I think Kudus on his best day he walks into our team first and foremost. And I think that he offers us so much more of what we need than in a fully fit squad than what Eze provides.
Let's clarify. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Dave. I was going to clarify, though, maybe on, do we think that Spurs are doing this deal because it's an easier deal to get done for Spurs? Or is it more to what Sean is saying, that Kudus is a better fit than maybe an Eze? Is it an easier deal for them to get done, or is it a better fit?
You'd like to think it's because it's a better fit. But with Tottenham, there's always that possibility. The fact that you have to ask that question shows there's that possibility. You know, when it comes to Eze, look, I think ideally I'd love to sign both players, and then you look at the likes of other players like Udebar or something, or some of the younger players, you go, right, go out on loan for a year. You know what I mean? That's fine. Yeah. I'm okay with that, with doing that. And I think that's a possibility Spurs fans need to get in their head, because automatically when we're looking at players, we go, well, what are we going to do with this guy? You got to remember, some of these kids are 19, 20 years of age. It's okay to send them out and improve the level of the squad and say, right, this is now, this was the level you need to get to, but now this is the level you need to get to. You know, and that way you're dragging their ability, you're improving their ability and stuff like that. It's okay to think like that. Look, I ideally would like us to go and sign both. I think one factor, though, with Kudus that doesn't actually get factored into a lot of the analysis baked about him. And if anyone's watched that Liverpool documentary with Jurgen Klopp and that on Amazon Prime, one thing they done is explain, you know, with Darwin Núñez, although he doesn't score a lot in terms of official goals and assists, the amount of chaos and the amount of people that actually benefit and score and assist off the back of the chaos he creates. And that's why Jurgen Klopp kept on playing him, kept on picking him, kept on using him, because he created that chaos factor that others actually benefited off. And I think Kudus is of a similar ilk, where because he can take players on, you know, stuff like that, eventually the ball's going to bounce him off from somewhere or bounce off a player, going to someone else's path, they put that away. He doesn't actually officially get, you know, the assist or whatever, but he's the one that's actually broken the lines, created the chaos for that to happen. And I think with Kudus, I don't think that gets factored in around this guy enough either.
I mean, some people are questioning whether he can actually cross a ball. Do people rate his ability, like as a winger, to do some of the basics of taking it past your man, crossing a ball? I think he does.
Good
I've seen him put in.
Yeah, he seems like I think has everything. I think in a Frank system, it doesn't really matter, because I feel like ideally we're going to be relying finally on Pedro Porro to put the ball in the box.
No, yeah, your wingers have to be able to cross the ball. We can't rely on your fullbacks to do that job.
I'm only looking at it in terms of the answer to can he cross the ball is I don't really know, to be honest. But I'm just looking at it in terms of like what we have now, and I don't feel like any of our players other than the fullbacks can really cross the ball anyway. But he's a better profile of winger than what we've got, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Soren's saying the same thing. We definitely need someone who can actually cross a ball into the box. I think Kudus has that ability. I think the only point that, I'm a little bit, kind of indecisive on is kind of what Stevie has brought up, the fact that he has had a bit of patchy form. But when I do watch Kudus, he seems like a guy who sort of just has a lot of everything. Like, he checks a lot of boxes. He can take it past players. He scored spectacular goals that only really great players can really score, that have that techie or technical ability to be able to do it. But then also he has, just sort of an X factor, like Dave brought up, like a lot of Maverick style, maybe number 10 or just good quality players have. I guess what we're looking for this summer, though, is someone that can not only score goals, but can create goals. Those seem to be the players that we're after. Eze is a guy who can create as well as finish off moves. Semenyo is a guy that has shown in the last maybe 2 seasons, 1.5 seasons, he can create, but he can also score goals. Do we think Kudus is a guy that can do that? He sort of is being brought in to do it all, because Brennan Johnson, that's our big issue, Sean, right? Is that he finishes off moves, but doesn't do anything else really apart from that. Whereas Kudus, we kind of need him to be able to score goals like Brennan Johnson does, but then maybe create goals at the same time.
So I was on a stream earlier with a Nottingham Forest fan who was pitching the argument that Anthony Elanga, who's a target for Newcastle, is valued at 65 million quid, right? Because he's homegrown, because he's been a sensation, and because Nottingham Forest don't need to sell, and because he got 18 GA last season. I said on that basis, is Brennan Johnson worth 75 million? Because Brennan Johnson's homegrown. Brennan Johnson, we don't need to sell. Brennan Johnson scored the Europa League winner, and he got 23 GA.
Do you know what the difference is, though, there, Sean? Is with Elanga, every time he gets the ball, he poses a threat. With Johnson, it's only a moment.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I wasn't being serious. I wasn't.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't think he's worth 75 million quid. But if the valuation metric is based on homegrown English tax or whatever, British tax, and the fact that we're taking into account GA, the reason I mention that is because, to go sort of full circle, I think that if Tottenham are going to bring in like an Eze and a Kudus, like I think Kudus is a brilliant player. I really do. I think on his day he's unplayable. He's got that Maverick thing you were talking about. So does Eze, for what it's worth. I think Semenyo's only priced what he's priced at because Semenyo, because Bournemouth have already been absolutely ransacked.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right, and that they don't want to lose a 5th player out of out of their best fight.
They're pricing people off their prize assets now, aren't they?
And he's got 3 to 4 years left on the contract. It's just
right? Because Bournemouth are not going to be able to go, even if Bournemouth raised 300 million quid this summer, they're not going to be able to spend it on 5 players, because no 60 million pound players going to Bournemouth, right? So there's a disincentive for them to sell any more of their top players. So yeah, Semenyo's a great player. I love Semenyo, and he's got a magic wand of a foot on him. The way he strikes the ball with absolute fury, but he still finds the corner. It's definitely valuable, but it's not valued at that price relative to other things. What I would say is that if you do make the decision to go and get Kudus, and then Tottenham are going, well, we still need someone else in the front line, I'm not necessarily anti the idea of. We haven't seen any links for this. It seems like it's not even up for discussion, and I don't really understand why. You made the point, Dave, was saying, well, why don't we loan out Odebear? I'd make the argument I'd rather keep Odebear and sell Brennan Johnson than keep Brennan Johnson and loan out Odebear.
Wow. Oh, definitely going to get the Johnson fans in the chat. Please let us know.
I wouldn't be opposed to it.
That's not me saying I hate Brennan Johnson, even though I have a little meme of him jogging on the spot as a horse. Right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, there's a reason. The reason every club has a revolving door of players, right? And so there's no reason why you can't.
The reason why I say loan out Odegaard is I'm just going off the back of last season. Spurs won't sell Johnson off the back of last season. So if we were to bring in another option there, it's okay. Because automatically people go, what are we going to do with Odegaard? Okay, it's fine. Loan him out. He's still a young kid.
Well, why can't you sell Brennan Johnson? Why can't you sell Brennan Johnson for 50 million quid?
But the club ain't going to sell him. No one's going to come in and buy him.
Why not? What makes you say that?
I just don't think they will.
I think a majority of football, I mean, from what I can tell, even after this great season that he's had, you still kind of ask people, with Brennan Johnson, he still baffles people for the fact that we did spend that much money. Even Forest fans, I think, have, despite how much they might love him from coming through, the club, I think
Would
they
Fo-
even
if-
were
if-
surprised
if-
that we spent that much money on him.
If Forest sold Anthony Elanga for 65, would they consider buying back Brennan Johnson and just writing off half the debt that they probably still owe us?
No.
No?
I don't think so. I think if they're doing it on a financial situation, maybe. If they're doing it on a footballing decision, the difference between Elanga is, every time he gets the ball, he poses a threat. There's always
in that system. In that system, it's easier to cause a threat. Like I was making this argument to this guy Wolfie earlier on today. He was like, Anthony Elanga would be a dream for any team. I was like, no, he wouldn't. No, he wouldn't. He's absolutely perfect for his pace is insane for a team that sits with a bank of 5 and 4 for 80 minutes of a 90-minute game, and they just pick people off. But you can make the same argument for like Brennan Johnson got the reputation he did by doing exactly the same thing. You put him in a different team. You put Anthony Elanga in the Newcastle team, and Newcastle United are playing against Sunderland and 70% possession. How is Anthony Elanga going to terrorize teams when he's got a bank of 5 in front of him? Elanga is only the beneficiary of the model.
But it's not about a different team. It's about the step up. That's what we're talking about here, step up. Because usually when you're playing at teams like Forest and stuff, like they're not going to finish where they finished again next season and stuff like that. That was, flash in the pan. The rest of the teams would be better and they'll be, back down where they should be and stuff like that. But the reality is, with Nottingham Forest to play the counter-attack of football, but it's to step up to where most weeks you're at a big club where actually teams set up counter against you. Do you have the ability then to still find space to have that impact when defenses are more compact against you rather than having all that space to run into? I get what you're saying. But like with Anthony Elanga, the reason why I think someone like Kim Wood and Brennan Johnson struggles is Elanga can cross the ball. Doesn't matter how much space he has to run into. You can either cross the ball or you can't. Elanga can cross it. Brennan Johnson hasn't really shown that ability. So that's the massive difference. And that's why I think Elanga would have the chance of making that step up, because at a big club, when you're playing against teams that primarily set up to stop you, you have to create, it's up to you to create the half a yard and then deliver. Elanga can do that. Johnson can't.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I think that Johnson forged his reputation on doing not that dissimilar stuff to Anthony Elanga is just a faster, more dynamic version. But I think that they both forged their reputation in a specific style of football.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Big question mark, which is what we have in the title of the show here today. And Sam, Sean, Dave, everyone has to answer this. Is he a realistic successor to Sonny? Because we know that Sonny's future is under doubt right now. And it feels like Kudus, knowing Spurs, probably will be lined up as the marquee signing. And with Sonny potentially out the door, is Kudus good enough to take over the throne, take over the reins from Sonny? Sam, so you haven't spoken in a while, so how about you take that on? 24 years of age. He is young, so he has time on his hands to do it. But
yeah, I mean, what? Son was 22 when he came, is that right?
Yeah.
So it still took Son, at least a couple years. He was scoring goals, but he was definitely not a talismanic figure. He wasn't the one that you were talking about out of like Kane, Eriksen, Dele, and Son, right? He was probably third on that list. But obviously over time he developed. The only thing I would say that goes against Kudus is that Son had Harry Kane. I know you could argue the other way around of Harry Kane had Son, but we haven't got a player like that, a talismanic figure, in terms of someone like a Harry Kane that Kudus could feed off of, learn from, be inspired by. We're going to be, I'm sure that's
got to hit the ground running.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll effectively be asking him to inspire himself on the pitch because at least at the moment, we just haven't got anything else, which is, I think, the point Dave was making earlier about, what we're lacking and having an Eze and a Kudus would be obviously ideal. I think that it's way too soon to say that he could be a genuine Sonny successor. And by that, I mean, anyone can come in and play after Sonny and be all right. But in order to live up to the legend of Heung-min Son, I think that there's a lot of work that would still need to be done.
That's a good point.
They're obviously also slightly different players because Son, I know Son would play up front, but I feel like I feel like Kudus can also play in that sort of like creator-ish role in the middle behind the striker, whereas we never really saw Son do that.
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of player, but you'd hope that after a few years, once he hits like sort of 26, that he would be stepping into that Son fulfillment. If we were to sign him, that is, I'm sure I can hear a lot of people rolling their eyes. That's
Yeah, in a week or two's time.
when I said 2 years, but it's like, obviously we all want him to come in and hit the ground running, and we're hoping that he contributes. If he does come in, we're hoping that he contributes, goals and assists off the bat, and I have no doubt that he could, but it's how consistent that is. And, I feel like I can't really give a truthful and sort of, backed up answer to your question based on what I've seen so far. Because so far I would say no, but then having watched Son before, it wasn't really until Harry Kane started getting those like couple-month injuries at the end of seasons where Son just suddenly stepped up, and everyone was like, "Oh shit! Like Heung-min Son might be the guy." So it didn't, as I said, didn't come straight away for Son. So there's time for Kudus. I'm not 100% sure that he's the successor, but I think that there is potential.
I think Sam used a good word there, Dave. Can he become a talismanic figure like Kane, like Sonny had to become? Is he that good that he can be the face of Tottenham Hotspur in a year or two's time?
Look, I actually I understand the question you're sort of getting at, where it's not that he's not going to come in and offer what Son's offered us straight away off the bat the last few years, them heights, and match the numbers that Son's put up, right? But the idea of it in terms of, can he get there? I think, yes. I think that's the idea behind it. Try and replace a big name out with what is relatively what people in the game would regard as a big enough name moving forward. I think, yeah, in terms of trying to replace the name, yeah. But in terms of on the pitch, it's going to take a while to get to there. Like Sam was saying, with Sonny didn't come in, was instantly like that. Took a while to get there, Same with Harry Kane, for instance. He didn't come into Tottenham. He was like that. He took low moves, everything else. Took him a while to get there. But theoretically, I think that's the plan behind it, that he's going to drag himself to that level.
Is he a here and now player? Like, does he qualify as a guy that's good enough for the here and now? I guess that's a big question mark.
Yeah, I think he does. I think, I think if we sign him, I'd be surprised if we're not signing him to walk straight into that first 11, to be brutally honest with you, Jack. I think he is a good enough player to walk straight. If that's what we're getting at, I think he's a good enough player to walk straight into that 11. Yeah, if I'm expecting, if he's all fit and we get the deal done early and he's up to scratch and all that, he'd be in that team sheet first game of the season, yeah.
Okay. Well, I only have really one last question, really, and I'll just throw it to Shawnee.
Lad. I just need to grab a drink, lad.
Yeah, cold shower, splash on your face. Is he someone that can basically be the successor to Sonny, Sean? I mean, is he actually that good? Is he a guy that can be here and now, come in, take over the mantle?
Kudus, yeah?
Kudus, yes. Of course, I was joking. In a week or two's time, we'll be linked to someone else, and then I'll be asking the same question about the next player.
I don't think he's going to be that. I genuinely think that. I think that if we're getting rid of Sonny, that I genuinely don't think that Kudus is the replacement. I think Kudus is coming in to play off the right, and maybe in the 8 or the 10 or whatever at moments, whatever, right? But I don't think he's coming in to replace Sonny. I think either Sonny's staying, and then it'll be Sonny and Tell off the left next season, or if Sonny does leave, I think there'll be another bomber on the left hand side. It won't necessarily be an Eze. It might be a Mikhail Tadzi. It might be it could be any number. There's probably 20 players that I could think of that will come off the left hand side. But I just don't see Mohammed Kudus as a left winger. I think he was shoehorned out there, and I think kind of like Rodrigo, right? Rodrigo at Real Madrid, right? He's leaving Real Madrid because he just can't get the space in the team and the position that he wants to play relative to the other guys that are out there. And I think that you've got, I think that's what happened at West Ham on a much smaller scale. I think that Graham Potter came in and started mixing things up, and that's the genesis of his distaste. He wants to play in the position that he thinks he's best at, and I think he's best on the right that drifts in. And that's fine for me. That's absolutely fine. As long as we go to a traditional fullback system that doesn't invert as well. Otherwise, we'll be like as narrow as a sparrow. And that's like, that doesn't help. That doesn't work. But if you have a winger that wants to cut in, and you have someone like Pedro Porro that wants to get on the outside, that's fine with me. But I don't think that Sonny's going to be replaced by Kudus.
Okay.
I just don't see that happening. I think if Sonny leaves, I think you'll see another player coming in that will be a traditional left winger. Like I say, it might not be Eze, it might not be like a 17, 16 million pound sort of player. I think that Tottenham are like, it's Semenyo or Kudus, a right winger that can play in the 8 or the 10 rather. But if Sonny, and maybe Sonny stays, but if Sonny does leave, first of all, that won't happen until after the first preseason game, because he has to go there. And so on that basis, even if he does leave, it will be late in the season. And then if we do replace him, it will be late in the summer.
It'd be terrific to get another decent enough player on the left as well as Kudus. I think what I'm excited about.
Just to finish the point super quick. I also think, and I'm not sure if you're going to go in this direction with your questions, but the story about Romero leaving, if he leaves for like 60 million quid, 65 million euros, whatever it is, I don't think that Tottenham will replace him. I think that Tottenham will look at our centre-back situations and probably either go and get someone that's like a 25 million pound potential new Romero in the future, like a Lukumi or a Leone, someone like that from Italy, a Paratici bomber. But you're going to end up with 40 million pound surplus there. And so if you can like make things work, imagine if you could go and rebuild your midfield without having to touch the budget for the forward line. Imagine if you could go and get like a Douglas Luiz for 25 and a Polinia for 30 or 25, whatever that is. And that's the Romero money, right? Immediately you protect yourself from losing 15, 18 goals. Immediately you get yourself maybe 7, 8 places back up in the league. Even the value justification for something like a Polinia to a guy like Daniel Levy, well, there's no sell-on value. Yeah, okay, but the value is not in the sell-on. The value is in the merit point money that you're going to get from not conceding as many goals by having a guy that can just protect, like what Caicedo is doing right now. It's unbelievable what he's doing for Chelsea in the Club World Cup. He's not going to be on the back pages of any newspapers because he's not the hero. He's the unsung guy who just sits there and knows how to be a 6 and sniff out the threat and just be in the right position at the right time. So when Chelsea throw 9 men in front of the ball and they lose the ball in transition, what we have is a Bentancur that doesn't know how to stay touch tight in the rest defence. What you have in Caicedo is a guy that understands the game and knows where to be to sniff that out. And then as soon as he recovers it, he pushes it forward again. You go and get someone like a Polinia for 25, 30 million quid and a Douglas Luiz who can sit in front as one of those two in the double pivot in a back three, or however you want to, we can talk about the complexity of the tactics, but you do that, you don't need to replace Romero. And then Tottenham have all of the money that you get from selling Sonny, all of the money that you might get from selling Solomon, all of the money that you might get from selling Richarlison, and then you can go and get yourself a Kudus, and you can go and get yourself another left winger and or an everything guy that can play in the 9 as well.
I think like on that midfield, I guess making up for a Romero loss, like it can happen if that's how Frank wants to use his midfield. If he really just wants to have the midfielders just sit in front of the back line and just block up them pathways, and then the center backs are almost given a bit of an easier job of just clearing, sort of crosses away and just dealing with kind of the aerial duels, that plenty of center backs would have to deal with. But I do feel like Romero just has that profile that, to a degree, I think is irreplaceable. It's just whether you get the most out of that profile. Because Romero, in my opinion, is like the best passing center back we've seen at the club since Alderweireld and since Jan Vertonghen. But does Frank? I don't know enough about Thomas Frank. I'm not sure he's ever had a player of that quality, in the back line to use, to help start moves, especially if we are to still be a team that wants to dominate possession, build out from the back. Romero is almost invaluable for that because he's a guy who can pick out those passes that other center backs just simply can't. I don't even know any other center back in our team that really can't do that. Mickey van de Ven, I mean, he's decent enough on the ball, but he actually almost seems to like to shift it out to the fullback instead of playing those kind of line penetrating passes, through the midfield like Romero does. But like you say there, like maybe Frank doesn't necessarily play that way. Maybe he uses more the midfielders to do that. You can make up for that loss. It's just Romero, for me, is just irreplaceable in that department, specifically when it comes to, playing out from the back.
50% minutes, though, Jack, right? He doesn't play much more than 1 in every 2
Mickey
games.
van de Ven still has played fewer minutes every season than Romero has.
I hear you. And that's another problem. For sure.
Yeah. I was going to say this, and someone can welcome to, tell me, whether this isn't going to be the case or not. But I do feel like Kudus, what I do like about him is that there is the potential we could have 2 to 3 players in the Spurs team, you know, with Madison and Kulusevski that you would hope in the future. Maybe Madison's more for the here and now in this area. But I feel like Spurs for a while have lacked guys that can score goals and create goals, like a Cole Palmer, like an Eze at Crystal Palace, where they do virtually everything. Like Dave brought up before, they're kind of those Maverick style players that can just make something happen out of nothing. And when the chance falls to them, you know they're going to put it away, or you know they're capable of brilliant goals that maybe guys like a Brendan Johnson just aren't, right? You know, guys like Johnson who are just there at the right place at the right time can finish off moves. But we need somebody that when you are 0-0 or 1-0 down, you know, in the 80th minute or something like that, a guy who can just cut inside, whip one into the top corner. I do feel like Kudus has the potential to be a guy like that for this Spurs team, or in just in general in football. And it'd be nice to have Kulusevski, Madison, and Kudus almost all in the same team at the same time that are really just quality players. And, you know, you saw that with West Ham. They pretty much just relied at one point on Kudus and Jared Bowen to do practically everything, you know, in their attack, because they were good enough. They were guys that could create and score. That's, I think, the dreamlike scenario with Kudus.
Do you know what it is,
he becomes like a Cole Palmer or something.
Do you know what it is, Jack? Like the players you mentioned there, you know, even like Kane, Son at Tottenham, you know, years gone by. Player that when he gets the ball, he gets you out your seat. He's a consistent danger. Every time he gets that ball, you're thinking, any moment now, this ball can end up in the back of the net.
Yeah, what's
that's the sort of guy we lack at Tottenham Hotspur. It's a bit like me on pro clubs, right? You know, every time I get the ball, the boys get a stiffy and they're all running, feed me, Dave, feed me, because they know it's coming. You know, they know they're going to score a goal. That's sort of like what we need at this club in Tottenham Hotspur. A guy that as soon as they get the ball, you hear the seats slapping up back. You know, people that have stiffies and they're sitting there going, fuck me, this can end up in the back of the net at the end of any minute. You know, that's what we need in this team, that unpredictability factor, that fear factor, that when teams come, their game plan is to set up to stop that guy, which effectively, when you've got that, it actually creates more space for the other guys to work in and actually, you know, have greater effect on games and stuff like that. So that's the sort of guy we're missing. Someone like me.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, just so everyone knows, we all know that the ball is coming from Dave because he doesn't know how to shoot. He gets scared in the box. Don't let him talk a
Too unselfish.
I'm one of them. I prefer to get the assist and actually score the goal, lad.
Nah, bollocks. I don't believe that for a second.
I do.
I bet you were a selfish little shit when you were playing it.
His head is gone.
No, I wasn't, lad. I wasn't.
Anyway, the question that I was going to ask is kind of similar to what Jack asked, but you can look at his question from 2 points of view, which was whether Kudus could be a Son replacement in terms of a player on the left, or a Son replacement in terms of, like, as I sort of said before, like a talismanic type figure. So to build on the last bit of that, do you guys think, I mean, you can use Kudus if you want, but do you think that we have someone already in the club, you know, that could eventually become, you know, a Son-like figure? Doesn't have to be a winger, could be a midfielder, could be, you know, a striker, centre-back, whatever. Or, you know, are we still heavily in the process, do we think, of trying to locate that future star more than just like being a good player?
I think they have 3 players that they've almost lined up to potentially be that Odegaard, Tell, and then maybe, I mean, this is probably the 3rd one in line, but then Youngman Hook, I guess, to some degree, you know, maybe in 5-10 years time might be the next Sonny replacement of some sort, but you are playing the long game there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was about to say the same thing to you. I think we've got plenty of players that can reach that level. I'd even go as far as saying I think Jamie Donnelly, if given the opportunity and, you know, he stays grounded and stuff like that, could go on to reach them heights. Mikey Moore, sort of similar, could go on and reach them heights. We've got a lot of potential players that can be them guys, but they're a few years away from being them guys. You know what I mean? In terms of, you know, how many Lamine Yamals are out there where 17 years of age, they're ripping up people. And at the end of the day, how many managers are out there that are going to give a trust to someone like Lamine Yamal to be able to go and do that as well? So, you know, for me, I think we've got a lot of potential players that can do that. I think Bergvall is one that, like Jack said, I think, you know, he could end up being one of the world's best midfielders. And he just strikes me as the type of guy that's always going to stay grounded, never going to get too carried away with the lifestyle, the hype and stuff like that. You know, but there's a lot of the thing is, there's a lot of unknowns within that, though, because, you know, people can get caught up with the lifestyle, surround themselves with the wrong people, you know, get the wrong agent involved. There's so many variabilities. You know, a massive injury could completely derail any potential that they did have, or, you know, getting them back to that sort of level. So there's so many variabilities. Like, I'm okay with having, like, you should always have players that can be that guy, but you also need players that are that guy, for them guys to have that example to follow.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I do think there are plenty of players that in the long run could become the next Sonny in line in terms of being those creative talisman on the left wing. I'm just excited by the fact that we could have, in my opinion, I think Kulusevski, David rates really highly, a guy who could maybe in a few years' time kind of be that all-action creative midfielder that can sort of do everything. But then you already have Madison at the moment, who I think improved tremendously from last season and kind of is more for the here and now. And then to have Kudus, I just like the idea of having more guys in the team that can sort of do a bit of everything. Whereas, like we've said with Johnson, he's brilliant at finishing off moves. But apart from that, you know, what does he actually really contribute? Whereas the Kudus is maybe in the future someone like a Kulusevski. And then, in my opinion, right now with Madison, guys that do, like Dave said, they sort of get asses out of seats. You know, they kind of get you excited, you know, the moment that they get on the ball, because you just feel like they could pull a bit of magic, you know, of anywhere. And also when we come up against,
paying your match day ticket for, right? For
Yeah.
that magic.
And when you come up against a low block, sometimes you need a guy that can, I mean, it's cliche to say, but a guy who can just put an absolute peach of a cross, you know, towards the back post that you just can't miss, or a guy that can take it past 1-2 players. All of a sudden, you know, he's created a bit of an opening, a bit of a gap, and then he can fire one into the bottom corner. Like, it felt like at Spurs this last season, Sonny was probably supposed to be that guy, wasn't able to really do it. Madison maybe started to become that towards the end of the season. Kulusevski was just burnt out by the end of the season, but we really were missing maybe that extra player that just has an X factor in him, that is a guy that can just sort of create magic out of nowhere. And I think Kudus hopefully can be that guy straight away, but then in the long run can really be consistent in being that player for Spurs.
Yeah.
Super Spurs asking, what do you think of Morten Hjulmand from Sporting? Sean, for me, I mean, you know your stuff on this regard. He reminds me a bit of, and forgive my overpronunciation of the Portuguese name here, Pedro Gonçalves, but he reminds me a bit of Pedro. Like, why is he not left? You know, Hjulmand. It seems like people were talking about him 2 or 3 years ago. Just the same with Pedro Gonçalves. You know, like, he was a huge player. That Dave wanted that guy, Pedro G, a long time ago. Like, and he's never left. Hjulmand's never left. You know, I love Portuguese. I love pronouncing.
Do it again.
Give me any Joaos. Give me any Joaos, and I'll have a lot of fun.
I don't know how his first name's. I don't know how his surname's actually pronounced, but I'm going to go with Jack's version. What is it, Pedro Gonçalves?
You can do Gonçalves, but I think it's like Gonçalves because, you know, they do it a little bit differently over there.
Yeah, look, I think that in Sporting Lisbon you have Valandas. Maybe you know how to pronounce his name better.
No, making me go red in the face. No, I don't need to do it anymore.
Is it Valandas? I don't know how you say it. The owner of Sporting Lisbon, Valandas.
Oh yeah, he's the Portuguese Levy, right?
Yeah, he's a Portuguese, exactly. Portuguese Levy, right? He's someone that's just an absolute brutal dictator of transfers. He's someone that just looks at like life through the lens of zero-sum game. You have to bear in mind with Sporting Lisbon, okay? I got in an Uber once, and an Uber driver was he was an ex-coach. He was like 40 years old, but he used to be a coach at Sporting. He took me to a lunch once, like I see my dad, and I had the most unbelievable half an hour with him. And I was like, so you were a coach at Sporting Lisbon? I said, what's it like working under Valandas and that? And he was like, it's a fascinating encounter with the sort of dictator, the way he conducts himself. But you have to remember that, and you might not be aware of this, but all the players that come through the Sporting Academy and that stay at Sporting, they have this conveyor belt of talent similar to Benfica. Right, Benfica has sold a £1 billion plus of talent into the European market, and they have this conveyor belt of new players coming through, predominantly from South America or from Portugal. But he said at Sporting, they have these tiers. It doesn't matter how good you are as a player. If you've come through the youth academy, then you are paid a certain wage, like everybody else is, for a certain amount of time. And then after a certain amount of years, you get promoted to the next tier. So you might have someone that's 17 years old or 18. Imagine like a Lamine Yamal. Imagine if he came through Sporting's academy, he would be paid X amount per week. And then some guy that's a nobody that's been at Sporting for 5 years that was in that second tier because of his tenure, he'd be paid more than the guy who's 17 that's clearly better, because they have this, it's like a respect ratio, whatever. Like, dress it up how you will, but that's what like Varandas has done to kind of create this notion of like family and that there's no one that's above anyone else. You get paid on your tenure rather than your quality.
And you don't get bullied out of making, or he doesn't get bullied when it comes to people forcing their way out of the club. Look at the Gyökeres, situation. He's even said, listen, I'm not, going to be the guy that, loses out here. Like, I'm going to get what I want.
You're not that guy,
this.
pal.
You know what though? He's absolutely spot on though, because look, like for me, Jack, the current market, I'm sitting there going, well, why is the market so slow? We were all promised the biggest Premier League market in the history of Premier League in terms of transfer spend. Yeah, Liverpool came out of the traps hot, so did City, but apart from that, it's been a little bit of a damp squib. And then I thought it was maybe because no one really knows whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market. And it's a bit of a Mexican standoff. Everyone's waiting for the first guy to pull the trigger. And when that happens, all hell breaks loose. João Pedro went for 55 million quid yesterday, right, to Chelsea from Brighton. 50, 60 million, whatever it is, something around that mark. I think that's a really good barometer. And I think if I'm entirely fair here, I think that Varandas has been validated in the fact to say, no, you're not going for whatever it is that you think you're going for. You're going to go for our number. And I think that he's right, because I think that once João Pedro's number was 60 million, at that point, everybody else is going to go, well, if João Pedro's 60, what does that mean that Gyökeres is? Yeah. What does that mean that Sesko is? What does that mean that Ekitike is? What does that mean that Osimhen is? And because João Pedro is like, he's a good player. Don't get me wrong, he's a good player, but like, I'm not. If I'm someone, I've got 60 million to spend, and if I can get Gyökeres or I can get Pedro, I'm getting Gyökeres all day long. But for me, I think everybody was waiting for the dust to settle. The direct question that you asked me though was around Morten Hormund. I think he's awesome. I think he's so good. He's a little bit like, he's not quite as mobile as you'd like, but then you don't need to be in that 6 role. He does exactly what Caicedo does. He does exactly what Palhinha does, but he's 10 years his junior or 8 years his junior. He hasn't got the Premier League proven experience, and yes, you're probably going to have to drop 50 million to get him out of Sporting, because that's the reality. But he's Danish. He's a brilliant ball winner, and he progresses the balls fast. So when he wins the ball back, it's not like he gets the ball back and then thinks about it for 3 seconds, then looks for someone to pass it to. Like, Palhinha is not a great passer. So Palhinha, if you're going to go and spend 25 on Palhinha, what you're going to get in him is excellence in his ability to sniff out the threat, win the ball back. Yeah. But he can't pass it. He can't progress it. He's not that sort of guy, right? He's not a great passer of the ball. But if you're going to get a Palhinha, you need to have someone next to him that comes back and lets him offload the ball, and then let someone like Bergvall or Bentancur or whoever then go and distribute, which is fine. Like, horses for courses. In Morten Højlund, you're probably paying twice, maybe even more, because in him you have a Danish version, I believe, of like a Caicedo in that, or like a an N'Golo Kante that sniffs out the threat. But when he does get the ball, he doesn't fuck around. Excuse my French. He doesn't hang around. He knows where he gets it, and he pushes it forward immediately. So if you are a team that pushes 8 men into the opposition box, and you're throwing caution to the wind, and then you get picked off like what we were doing under Ange Ball, then if you have a Bentancur that's playing in the 6 that isn't doing the touch tight thing in the rest defense, then you all sorts of problems. You put a Morten Højlund in there, and he's going to win that ball back, and he's going to immediately recycle it, push it forward the first chance he gets. And so it's just like it's like someone who's just like, I don't know if you've been in a fight where someone's not hitting you hard, but they're hitting you a lot. It's like it wears you down. It wears you down after a while. And I think that sort of player, like a Morten Højlund, that's the sort of player I would love to see him in a Thomas Frank system. I think we would. Yeah, I think we would love to have him. Super Spurs. It's probably part of our answer is just, it's hard to get those Sporting players out of that club, because of their owner. Even with Pedro Porro, it was a real negotiation. Levy had to fly over to Portugal, to face his Portuguese, version of himself in order to even get, the deal over the line. So that might be even the case why some other brilliant players at Sporting just haven't left yet, is because the guy, he's not someone to get pushed around, in terms of moves, and he's not one to just let go of his players easily. But I think we would love to have him. And thank you for the support, by the way, Super Spurs. And thank you to Eugene. Our baby is 1 month old. Eugene, thanks for the 10 months. And welcome to another Spurs fan to the family, Dave. He's got already, I think he's got a few, at the moment in the family. Yeah. So he's got plenty of
future Spurs fans to
Going
bring
to cost
over
them a
to London.
fortune now every year when the kits come out, innit?
Yeah, especially. Do they have the blacked out kit, in baby version? Do they have it for baby sizes? Levy usually is smart enough to do that.
Oh, he does, yeah. Oh, yeah,
Eugene.
he's every.
Yeah,
He's
for
got
like
stuff
70 quid.
He's got stuff for folksy
Only
and
70
everything
quid
there.
compared to the 150. Appreciate you, Eugene,
Yeah.
my man. And also, I know you've been talking a lot, Eugene, about getting rid of some of the wingers this summer, and maybe even Dave's suggestion of loaning out an Odebear or something like that might actually be a solution to that. But I think we wanted to end off on this question here, really, guys, which, Spurs haven't made any big moves yet. Could that be down to Thomas Frank's maybe lack of pull in the transfer market? Or is that what you can get, when you hire this project manager instead of maybe an instant success kind of guy, like maybe what we would have had with Conte, Jose? Why haven't Spurs maybe made any big moves yet? What's the delay? What's the holdup? Is it down to Thomas Frank?
I personally don't think it's down to Frank. I think that regardless of whether it was Frank or it was Ange or whoever, the club weren't going to move until they were ready. Find the best deals for them. If it was anything to do with Frank, I don't think it would be to do with necessarily pull, because I think that the Tottenham brand alone should be, maybe balancing his lack of pull, if that's what you're kind of implying. Okay. I would think that it's more to do with the fact that, as we see basically every single day, and half of them I can't even tell if they're even real quotes or if they're just people taking the piss, but it's like every day we're like, Thomas Frank likes the look of Ash Phillips. Thomas Frank likes the look of X. Thomas Frank likes the look of Y. So if these are to be believed, then maybe they don't even know what they actually need to go and get. So they've got their loose targets in terms of ones that could kind of get done regardless, like a Kudus, like an Eze, whoever else it is that we're looking at like that. But ultimately, in terms of trying to fine tune and get Frank the players that he wants, the players only went back to some of the players only went back to training today. So he's not even also welcome to the squad, Luka Vuskovic. But yeah, some of these players he would have probably never even seen play, or seen moments of them play. So to actually understand the kind of players they are, the mentalities they've got, we're probably going to still need at least another week before you see any moves, in my opinion, because he's going to need to get to know these players as they come back in drips and drabs.
I hear what you're saying on that, though, Sam. But let's not I think one thing people don't take into account when he's being interviewed for this job and the due diligence process being undertaken, he will be presenting, what he's trying to do, what players he has an idea he wants to keep and build around, and then what positions he feels Tottenham need to go in the market and strengthen for him. That would have all taken place, before he got the job. I get your point that, meeting the players and that, potentially there might be a player or two that might surprise him and originally go, do you know what, I can work with him, or a player that might go, do you know what, he's not as good as maybe I originally thought, I can't do the job I thought. I understand that. But we should still have, certain targets, because no manager's looking at that squad and going, that's perfect. Straight away, they'll all have their own idea of what they want to do and go, right, this needs improvement. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say Frank doesn't have the pull in the market, but it's yet to be tested. At Brentford, it's not like he was, identifying the players. They were bringing in the players and saying, right, go and work with them. It'll be interesting to see if players look at the Tottenham thing and go, right, well, they've hired Frank because they want another 4-year project, another 4-year plan to a certain degree. And it's going to take them a while to build up to instant success. The players that we sort of need to bring in here to try and drag us immediately into that Champions League, so that we can compete this year rather than get embarrassed and try and compete across competitions. You've also got to count in, they'll probably look at it and go, because a lot of them players, they want the quickest route to success. They don't want to hang around, so it's hard to get them to sign on the dotted line at Tottenham, because they'll be looking at it and go, yeah, okay, but how many years? And, are you going to sign the right players to keep kicking this project on? And you're going to keep sacking managers and stuff like that. So, I do think all of that sort of plays its part in the market to a large degree, Jack, that, you see some people start to get turned off, and that can very easily be a slippery slope, because then all of a sudden you get caught into where you're like with Man United, you're paying over the odds and wages for the output and the attitude that you're getting and shit like that. So I'm not going to say Frank doesn't have the pull, but I'm not sure players are climbing over a barrel to try and play for him, if you know what I mean. And
Like-
look, at the end of the day, I'm not saying it's going to be an excuse for Tottenham having a slow start to this market, but I'm not going to rule it out either. How do we know Tottenham haven't sounded out people and they go, well, look, I'm not sure about this, or I'm not sure about Thomas Frank, I'm not sure about the project, you know? And at the end of it, I think people are saying, well, it could be to do with the fact we haven't moved there due to the PSR and the new window. Okay, if that's the case, and everyone knew that was the case, then why have they been perpetuating rumours then for the last fucking, 4 to 5 weeks that Tottenham are going to sign this or Tottenham are interested here and everything else? If we're going to wait to the PSR window, come out and be upfront, come out and be frank, because then that only adds more conspiracy to that people are just printing off rumours just to get people to click, to keep it all going. Do you know what I mean? It's absolutely ridiculous. So for me, I'm just annoyed that we haven't moved in the market yet. Even if it was a case we're waiting for PSR, I think, again, if you want to play the safe aspect, yeah, okay, I understand that. But at some point, you've got to take risk and you've got to make note that other clubs, the clubs that we're trying to chase and compete with, have all made some of their marquee signings, already made some massive improvements to their squad. And we're still sitting here twiddling our thumbs. And when they get going again, how do we know they're not going to take some of the players that we've been pissing around trying to get in the door? So for me, act quick, but I can't. Look, it's going to be interesting to see if players turn down because they're not enamored by Frank. It'd be very interesting because that's something that hasn't actually been tested in his time at England.
Adrian saying, Jack, it's because the PSR financial fair play year starts today. I did hear that Liverpool's is actually sooner than Spurs's. I think I saw on Talk Sport or something that Liverpool, part of the reason they made so many big money moves quickly was because I think theirs ends or starts again in like May 31st or something like that. That was part of the reason why they had to make so many moves quickly or something to that avail. So it is interesting maybe that part of the reason why some teams take longer than others maybe is having to do with the accounting and whatnot. But I was always led to believe that Spurs didn't have to worry as much about, the PSR, with the moves that they could make, with the ending of each financial year. But this is not where I'm an expert on. I mean, I'm not as sure about the poll with Thomas Frank, but I do feel like Spurs have just automatically, by sacking Ange Postecoglou, taking a bit of time to bring in a new manager, waiting that extra week as well, milking the celebrations, maybe to agree as they should. But Spurs from the get-go have almost started off on the back foot and have already started off, a bit slowly because we were doing the celebrations for the Europa League. We took a bit of time whether to sack Ange Postecoglou or not. Then we had to bring in the new manager. The new manager hasn't even started training until today or something like that. So it just feels like, other clubs are already in a way ahead of us. Ruben Amorim has been at the club for at least 6-7 months. You look at Arne Slot, he's had a whole season already at Liverpool. Maresca's had a whole season at Chelsea. They already are in a way well ahead of us in terms of what they know they want to do with their squads. Whereas Thomas Frank is like literally fresh through the door. So it's just maybe been the case that Spurs have set themselves up to be behind, and we'll just have to find a way to catch up, I think, at some point this summer. That's just my take on things. We'll find out whether he has the pull, maybe a question that's definitely worth asking again, later down the road in the summer, after we do see what we actually end up pulling in. But Sean, maybe you're the last one we can ask on this. I mean, is Thomas Frank lacking pull? Is he not as sexy as Jose or Conte is when it comes to players wanting to come here?
I mean, you're never going to know those things until after the fact, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think we've found out any either way, right? Like so far since he's come in, we've signed Kota Takai and Matisse Tell, who was obviously already a deal done, and was his name something Boast, the guy from Leeds, right? The kid from Leeds. So look, I've got no idea, mate. I've got no idea. If I'm entirely honest, do I think he's probably got as big a draw as Mourinho or Conte? No. Do I think he has does my intuition say that he has the bigger sales pitch than Postecoglou, Big Ange? No, I don't. I think Ange Postecoglou is just a sales guy. I know. I'm not sure how your audience feels. I haven't caught up.
That doesn't matter. You're here for your opinion. So
yeah, I know. But like, I'm gonna tell you right now. Like, I genuinely think that Ange Postecoglou as a tactical guy is a fraud. But I think as a sales guy, he's the best that there is. And I think that he was so inept and out of his depth at setting up teams at this level. But I think the ability to spin a yarn and to be able to tell people the words in the right order that they wanted to hear to get the job done, both with bringing players in and with motivating a really capable team for the big moments. I think he was sensational, right? So like, it's not a disgrace. Like, not many people are brilliant at everything in life. I don't think he was good at the things that I think Thomas Frank is better at him at, and I'd probably say that Thomas Frank isn't as good as he is at the things that Ange Postecoglou was fantastic at. So if you're looking for my supposition on where does Thomas Frank sit in the pull category, I'd say probably bottom of the pile. But that doesn't mean that we can't bring players in. And I think that it's far too early to tell. We haven't gone up against anyone yet, or at least we don't know that we have or haven't. Maybe, look, if Manchester United, maybe Mbeumo, who knows? Maybe Mbeumo has worked with Thomas Frank and, he decided he wanted to go to United for those reasons or for money reasons. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think it's far too early to tell me. We have to like sort of get out of the habit of judging the window as it's happening. I think even judging the window at the end of the window is too early. I think you have to give it a year before you can look back and reflect on the window. Only now can we look back on the last season window and say, was it good enough? But at the end of the window, everyone wrote it off. Probably they were right to write it off because it was too youth centric. But I think we, as a fan base, I think we're just in the habit of just judging things in the moment, and sometimes you have to let things settle.
I think, unfortunately, we might not have that luxury because we do have to, just sort of report it as it comes and then give our opinions of how it goes. If only we could just flash forward every time, 6-7 months later, and then give our opinions. Hence why you've said before, Sean, people, if you look back at everything everyone says, over the course of a long period, you'll just see how much flipping back and forth people go on various things. So we'll see, in 6-7 months, what we may think of the window. I agree with you, though, that Ange Postecoglou might have had more pull when it comes to getting the final phone call, with the player and convincing them, what they can achieve together, how he can fit him into the squad, that sort of thing. Even Thomas Frank has more or less said, he's not a guy that's a real motivator, in that sort of department. He says he thinks of himself as pretty calm, cool, collected, and just very logical. And that's what his appeal is, I guess, is that he's not a guy that's going to lose his rag, every minute, or something like that. He's not toxic to any degree. So that's part of, I guess, his strength. But he even said that's part of his weakness, is that he's not someone that maybe is the best of motivators, all the time. So we'll see how that plays out, I guess, even in the
there's someone in your chat that clearly is not quite over Ange yet. Going after me the entire time.
Who's that?
Romeo, right? Romeo. Oh, Romeo, where art thou, Romeo? You're still over.
He hasn't replied to any of my comments. Every time I've messaged him, he's just ignored it.
Romeo, look.
No, it's fine. I'm not calling him out. It's fine.
I get you maybe not over Ange, but I'm just going to say, look, just give Sean a go. He's a good guy. You can disagree with his opinion all you want, but that doesn't mean, he's not a bad character or anything like that. You know what I mean? So give him a chance. Give him a chance.
SOF also bringing up a good point at the end.
I've got a thick enough skin. I'm more than used to it, mate. I got so much of this stuff. It's fine.
SOF bringing up a good alternative point that maybe wasn't mentioned. Yeah. What do the other clubs have, in terms of pull wages? Spurs don't pay high enough wages to then, convince players to come. And then Man United have wages and the allure of Manchester
Chelsea,
United.
Though, right? Chelsea, listen, that whole wage pool thing is, I think it's genuinely, I think there's truth to it to a degree, but I think it's massively oversaturated in the narrative. I genuinely think that, first and foremost, let's look at the risk of overpaying. Look at Manchester United right now. All the ambitions in the world, they're being cock-blocked by their own misspend on wages. They can't move players in that they want because they can't get rid of the players that are on long-term contracts like Rashford, Garnacho, Sancho, Anthony, that they overpaid for, Casemiro, they overpaid for, and that they also paid massive money to. And I got Garnacho's not on the same sort of salary as the rest of them, but there's a risk to paying big money. Tottenham themselves have felt the pinch of that situation when it came to Ndombele. I'd also say that, show me 5 players that Tottenham have been up against the big teams for, and we've lost out on them on a wage deal conversation, and that's it. And I would say you're going to struggle to name me 5 players on that basis alone, because the main jurisdiction, if money was everything in football, then everybody would be playing in Saudi, but they're not for a reason. Look at Bruno Fernandes, right? The other factor that's massive, which is the unfortunate reality that we sit in that no one else does. The unique reality is that we are part of the Big Six, And that therefore means that fans think that we should be able to compete with the big six. But the 5 of the other big six have won 92% of all trophies in the last 25 years. Yeah. And that is the big draw. It's not money. Yeah. It's the probability
of winning
the
club. Yeah. No.
And it's the probability of winning success frequently. So like Jack, you just said Manchester United, but Chelsea have won far more than Man United have in the last 15 years. Far more. Them and Manchester City have won 75% of all trophies in the last 15 years. Right, and they're the 2 new boys to the game, if you like, relative to the other 3, relative to Tottenham. But those guys have got, and it's ill-gotten gains, by the way. It's not legit. It's all through mechanisms of financial mismanagement, and they manage to find loopholes and attack those things all the time until they're closed, which they won't be. But the reason why someone would choose Chelsea over Tottenham is not necessarily because of wages. It's because of the fact that they're going to win more. They're more likely to win more trophies at Chelsea. Yeah.
So you're saying it is partially to do with wages, but it's actually the part that we maybe don't want to say out loud all the time. But it is the fact that, those clubs have the stature and have the history that players automatically will be attracted towards.
100%.
That's the bulk of their main decision. But wages come hand in hand. You're winning, you get the better sponsorships, more you're mopping up the prize money, you can pay better wages.
I'm not saying that wages aren't a factor, but if wages were the only force, then everybody would be in Saudi Arabia.
It's not the only force. Yeah, it's not the only force.
Everybody would be in Saudi Arabia if that was the case, right?
No, you are right. Like, historically, players want to move to the teams that have a history of winning trophies because, even if they haven't won it for 4 or 5 years, there's still statistically a chance they're going to get back there and win it again than any other teams, like at Tottenham and stuff. And that's what holds us back, is the irregularity of trophies. So if Tottenham are in a, trying to go up against a Man United, for instance, players are still going to pick Man United over Tottenham because, they have the capabilities of getting themselves back there quicker than Tottenham Hotspur.
100%.
And Iceman saying we don't even have a waterfall to offer, just like Old Trafford do. So that's definitely a big part.
We do have a hotel and potentially some penthouse
and a golf course.
Coming, so.
And Giant 68 saying we don't have the big 17 poll. Yeah, that's our poll is finishing at 17. It was always going to be, I think, a very Mohammed Kudus sort of centric conversation. I think we asked plenty of different questions about him. I joked in 1 or 2 weeks' time we might be repeating these same questions, just a different name of a player if Spurs don't get a move on. But hopefully they do, and we can, start to talk about marquee signings, and we can start to talk about major improvements, especially to the forward line, like Dave and I have been wanting for a long time now. But I think we'll wrap up things here, and then we'll get on to the members' questions. Thank you to all the members in the house. Hopefully you've left us a question for Dave and I to wrap up on, but we'll let Sean and Sam out of here. Shawnee, Spurs Talk Show, Football Link. I have that in the chat here. And thank you once again for joining us, sir.
No, I appreciate you guys. I'm really sorry I'm late. It wasn't deliberate. Bugsy Milan, like I say, I think she's broken. I've got to take her to the vet tomorrow morning now. It's a nightmare. But thank you very much for having me. And I'm very sorry for the delay, and appreciate everyone in the chat. Sam, great to see you. Jackie, love you to pieces, bro. Dave, you disappeared, but I love you, mate. I'll see you guys very soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Shawnee. Appreciate you, man. Great job as always. Great job as always. And Sam, your Twitter, you said you posted a thread recently.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the club's antics that get me, the breakdown of fans on Twitter and social media and YouTube comments, or maybe if it's just the fact that it's 34 degrees. But suddenly I'm like really done with like being a nice guy. So I've actually been calling a couple people out on Twitter, like just not like calling them out in front of everyone, just like a little comment here and there, like.
Yeah, you're in your evil arc.
Exactly, I am in my evil arc. So watch out, be careful. You never know. It could be you next. And thanks for having me on board as always. Love to have the chat. And big up everyone. Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs. Please show Sam some love, everybody. He's very consistent in being here for these shows. So please do show him some love. Follow him over on Twitter, on X. And now we're going to transition towards, I'm just putting it up on screen here as I'm talking out loud. Thank you to everybody for being here with us. I think we wish, we did have a real bomba to be talking about, but hopefully it happens by the end of the week. That's what Dave and I have been kind of saying behind screen, really. Like, we kind of just need something to start happening because we're not really the ones to make up news or anything like that. We'll talk about whatever's out there, but with Spurs, it has been a bit empty, for the most part in terms of transfer news, whether outgoings or incomings. But we'll do our best to put whatever's out there and give our opinions on it for you guys. But let's get to some of the members' questions. Thank you to all the members for supporting the channel. In case you didn't know, in case you're a recent member, maybe you're not a member, we do reserve time after the ends of these live shows to answer whatever questions we might not have addressed during the show, or whichever ones you'd like us to touch a bit further on. Trinidad saying, in the panel's opinion, isn't the Frank engine an instant fail and not a good sign of things to come if he can't even get his own boy Mbumo to sign? I guess that's an example he's bringing up that's similar to the question that we were just finishing up on, right? Like, if he can't even bring Mbumo over, what sort of pull does he have?
Well, I think it's do you know what? It's a fair challenge to the question, actually, Jack. So fair play to Trinidad. Look, I think you can sort of allude to that way, right? Surely if you're on Mbumo, right, yeah, Man United maybe offer you the more wages and stuff like that, but surely we're right now offering the more stable project to a certain degree. So yeah, I think it's a fair point by Trinidad. I think it's sort of, I wish I actually raised that question off the back of
it's not that example.
I just didn't. I actually raised it off the back of the Eze one. Is Eze potentially on his way to Arsenal because he doesn't believe in Thomas Frank,
And even if you didn't fully believe, whether he has pull or not, it's just not a bad example, to bring up, we should have mentioned that in the question, to be fair, Trinidad. Great question.
Yeah.
Sean Maddox saying, which younger players do you think will break through this season? If we don't see end product from Odegaard, should Spurs push him back in the pecking order? What front line are you hoping to see first game of the Premier League season? Looks like you and Shawnee, Dave, might be in agreement over potentially giving Odegaard some time away from the club.
Look, I'm only willing to give Odegaard time away if we've got substantial options across that front line, because, look, I do think I want to be clear, I think there's a real gem there in Odegaard. I think there's a real player there. But it's just not the player we need for the here and now. You know what I mean? I think a lot of last season, a lot of people attribute everything that happened to Ange Postecoglou. But we're in for a rude awakening this season if we don't sign better players in that forward area, because it will come back to bear fruit. It will come back to bite our ass, where we just don't have the consistency to keep scoring the amount of goals we need to be able to win games on a consistent basis. There's only so much Thomas Frank can do by bringing the defense to stability. But if your forward line is wank, then that ball's just going to keep coming, and eventually the dam is going to crack. So they need to improve that forward line for Thomas Frank for sure right now. And if they do that, and then we're looking to free up squad space, don't want to sell Odegaard, but let them go out and develop somewhere else. Let them cost them points, not us. You know what I mean, to a large degree. So that's where I'm at with it. Like, I'm not married to the part that Tell and Odegaard have to be in the squad this season. Because when we sign them and I question it, it's not for the here and now. Yeah, but for the future. Okay, well, for the future, also factor in that there could be loan spells for them, away from this football club in order to develop. So I'm not saying get rid of Odegaard, but I think if we were to sign a proper option, no problem loaning them out. When it comes to the younger players to break through, not going to lie, I hope this is Donnelly's time.
Yeah.
And the reason why I say that is, name me a player over the last few years that's gone out on loan from Tottenham Hotspur and had an impact and played the amount of games that he's had at a club with Leyton Orient last season. Troy Parrott couldn't do it. Dane Scarlett couldn't do it. There's been other examples of players that haven't gone out and had the impact this guy has had. And the fact that he's done that, I actually think it speaks to the quality of the player and the individual, because it's one thing doing it in an academy. Sometimes you can just have a good academy team, and sometimes your name can come to prominence because of how good others are around you. Whereas, the fact that he's now gone out on loan, gone into an environment where he's not known, there's no previous merit. He's literally going in based off what he produces in training, his own merit, becomes a key figure in that team, scores a similar goal like he did against Man City. That was replicated from under 21 level and stuff like that. To be such a key player, there's a real player in there. And for me, you've got to now give him the opportunity. Same with Mikey Moore. I still think there's a real gem there. Give him another opportunity. So they'll be the ones for me. I would like to see Tyrese Hall potentially. I'm not giving up on my guy yet. I'm not sure why he's not getting, the same attention, but I'd like to see him giving a go, Shawnee, in that regard. But yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, he's disappeared, but even though I still think he's a great player. All the players Dave mentioned, maybe I would just add at the end, Vuskovic, Sean. That would be fun if he actually got some real minutes this season, just because he's technically very good on the ball. So someone that maybe 5, 6, 7 years from now could replace Romero in terms of, passing out from the back, being very technically sound. But what I do like about him, in case Frank stays around for a long time, we saw that this guy knows how to win a header. He knows how to score from set pieces. And Frank is a guy that, when you think about that team, there are a lot of big, tall center backs in that side that, win set pieces and make life really difficult for opposition teams. And you could think Vuskovic, coming to the Premier League is a whole different ballgame, especially if you are, only 18, 19 years of age. But, that's kind of what we noticed the most, from his time away from, or on loan, should I say. That guy was just scoring goal after goal after goal from set pieces. So that should be a lot of fun maybe with Thomas Frank. But, that all the players Dave mentioned, and maybe Vuskovic. And what front line, I think at the minute, probably looking for Solanke, Kudus, and then maybe Johnson to compete with Kudus, and Sonny and Tell at the minute. That's probably the front line. I agree with what Sean mentioned earlier, though, like, especially if Sonny's to go, I do feel like we need to be bringing in another left winger of some kind. Dave mentioned Matoma in one of the videos. I would be in love with that summer window for the forward line, at least, if we had Matoma and Mohammed Kudus, to pick from in that forward line. And then you still had Matisse Tell, still have Odebear, still have Johnson. Like, those are a lot of great options, I actually think, in that case. That does feel a bit more, perfect in, a lot of areas. But that's mine. That's what I would say.
Before we move on to Rhino's question, I'll just take this from King Hodley. He says, Dave, I look at Donnelly on the ball and he's slow. That's my only concern. Look, I get he doesn't have the elite speed of Odebear, Tell, players like that. But it's not good having speed if you can't, control the ball and everything else. At the end of the day, the football moves faster than any player on the football pitch. You can ping that ball over 70 yards and it'll get there quicker than any player can move. So for me, that's one thing that stacks in Donnelly's favor. He's got a wonderful foot that can pick a midget stick out 60 yards away, And for me, that will always give him a chance of being a good player in the game. De Bruyne is not the quickest.
Yeah, I was going to say De Bruyne is a prime example of a very slow player. Yeah.
Never the quickest. But that guy could spray a fucking ball around. Modric, he ain't the quickest, but he can move a ball. And that's the ilk I think Donnelly is. Yeah,
I agree with the De Bruyne example. Probably one of the slowest, clunkiest players at times, but a guy that just give him half a second, all of a sudden just sprays it past and behind that you just don't see other players do. Dermatron, thanks for being here with us, sir. Big up, guys. Come on, your Harris Army. Come on, your Flat Cap Army. Hopefully you're enjoying your Hotspur summer, Dermatron, especially with sounds like the very humid, hot weather that you're having. With Ireland. So big up to you, sir. Thanks for the love. Thanks for the support, man. Brian Trestane saying big up Dave and Jack. Kudus is better than Son, but would West Ham let him come to us? I would not mind it myself, but I also would take Xavi Simons as well and have a decent CDM. Would you agree with that? Or if not, who would you want? My thing with the Xavi Simons is, like, he is very much a central creative midfielder. Like, he doesn't really play on the wing or anything like that. Whereas I do feel like we need a guy who can play out on whichever wing, left wing, right wing, can play in those sort of roles. Whereas Xavi Simons, he's like a clear just number 10 like midfielder. It's since we already have Madison, Kulusevski, guys who can play through the middle there. It just seems like maybe too many players, down the middle, where you need one of them to be able to play out wide. So I just don't know if Xavi Simons is the right fit, even though he's done great at Leipzig. He's done great. I just don't think we were saying, is Eze the right fit? Is Kudus the right fit? I think Xavi Simons fits in the least out of all the options. That Spurs.
Now look, even the greatest of people get stuff wrong every now and again. Everybody gets something wrong. Even Harry Kane done something wrong. He left Tottenham and he regrets it. But I'm trying to work out with someone like Xavi Simons. Is it more Football Manager FIFA hype around the guy? Because, his name's been banded around for quite some time. But
he's been one of the best players in the Bundesliga. He's been one of the best players. You look at his numbers. Yeah.
Fair.
No, he's produced some pretty crazy numbers in the Bundesliga. I think he's been RB Leipzig's best player for the past 2 or 3 seasons, you would say.
Was Werner at one point.
Not for the past 2 or 3 seasons.
But at one point he was their best player.
Yeah, probably a bit unfair, but and at the end of the day, someone was going to take their shot on Werner because he was scoring goals for fun at Leipzig. Is Kudus better than Son? I don't know. I mean, Brian,
No, you
I
can't
don't.
say
I
that.
mean,
That's disrespectful.
yeah, it's just I feel like he's been pretty disrespectful to Son recently because he was
Kudus
saying
is on the
Son's
right.
been
Son's
past. He
on
said,
the
"What
left.
is he said on the fan? You weren't there, Dave, but he said on the fan show, Son's been past it. The past 2 or 3 seasons." And it's like, well, if he's past it, then why would he be our top
Bang on. If he was
goal
past it,
contributor in the past 2 or 3 seasons? If he was past it, he'd be 5-6 goals and assists, or something. But the guy still finishes at the top of the goal contributor list, every season.
if he was past it, then why did everyone tell me he was going to make up Harry Kane's downfall? I don't know. I'm confused. Anyway, confused about that situation. But no, look, you got to take into account Kudus is at one stage of his career making the rise. Son is coming out after having that being at the top level. So I'm not going to sit here and say Kudus is better than Son, but there's a potential he could come into Tottenham and offer more output than Son moving forward. Yes.
No. Drop kick your teacher. Unfortunately, if Chelsea hijacks Kudus, I don't think we're going to bring anyone in. What are your thoughts on this? I think we will bring someone in. To be honest, Artist G, I think Spurs just have to, especially with what Daniel Levy said, in that interview saying, we're planning on trying to win the Champions League and win a Premier League. So I think he just has to. Lots of West Ham fans don't even rate Kudus. Is this not a gamble? Kind of gave a lot of our opinions, on Kudus earlier. I think a lot of, if you just go back in the show, I would say,
I don't respect West Ham fans' opinion on anything anyway. So,
I mean, he also has been, I would argue, their second best player, in the last 2 or 3 seasons. Since he's gotten there, it's Jared Bowen is by far their best player.
They'll feel it losing him.
And then Kudus, I would say, has been their second best player. For both of you, despite us winning the Europa, do you feel we aren't going to improve at all this season? Dave, let you go with that one. I think you've said Spurs are in danger of not really picking up from here.
Yeah, like that. And the reason why I say that is because with Postecoglou in charge, right? It was everyone, the whole world, pundits, fans, everybody was at the stage. Tottenham need to go out and sign 5, not marquee, but players of certain experience level, of a certain caliber to come in and really kick on next season. And if they can do that, you can quickly transform Tottenham's fortunes around. And my conspiracy theory around pulling the trigger and bringing in someone like Thomas Frank, because I'm sitting there going, okay, I'm okay to pull the trigger on Ange. Bring me a name of gravitas. They bring in Thomas Frank. Okay, and I look, okay, what would they like about Thomas Frank? Oh, they bring in undervalued players in the market. He develops them and they sell them on for massive profits. That was my cynical opinion around it at the time. People said, Dave, you're mad. But the longer the month goes on, the more people are starting to swing to my side of things, where it's like, Tottenham ain't going to go out and buy all these big players. They are going to continue. Like, for instance, right, we've sitting there, we need to improve our forward line. There's links to Semenyo, Eze, Kudus. None of them are done. But what did we do? We brought in a Japanese defender from the J League, relatively unknown. And that's the way I think some of these signings are going to continue. It's the same under Ange Postecoglou, and it come back and cost him his job. And I think it's going to do the same to Thomas Frank. That's my big concern. Now, look, I am not going to sit here, if Tottenham prove me wrong, and sit there and still fight my cause. I'm glad they proved me wrong. Delighted. That's what I want. That's where I want to get to. So thank you for delivering. But right now, I'm on their case because I know the club I support. We can sit here and dress it up as a footballing decision. I famously described that as a cost-cutting measure. They're dressed up as a footballing decision because they know now with Thomas Frank, they don't have to. And all of a sudden, as soon as they bring in Frank, not everyone's going, we don't need to go and sign that. Frank can develop these guys, so let's go and get these guys. It's already changed the opinion and narrative around of what Tottenham needs and everything else. It's fucking genius. And one thing, people don't take into account, and take yourself out of the immediate and sit back and actually look at the bigger picture. Sometimes these people are that clever. They know if you put a certain narrative around things, people buy it without actually taking a step back and looking into it. So that's my cynical opinion on it. I'm still going to wait to be proven wrong. I'll give them time, but let's wait and see. Right now, I'm not enamored.
He's saying, what are your thoughts on the theory of if they sacked Ange because they knew he would be ambitious and demand more, as it would actually be a Tottenham player if he was still manager? I subscribe to the theory that Ange would have asked for more than what Thomas Frank would, but I don't know, maybe Dave would disagree with this, but we did lose to Crystal Palace both times pretty convincingly. So I wonder if Eze would have been a bit hesitant to actually come to Spurs, because Oliver Glasner showed to tactically found out Ange, in both games. He kind of smacked us the first game, even though I think it only ended up being like 1-0 or something like that away from home. I remember we got completely outplayed in that game at Selhurst Park. And then Dave and I were there in person to see the game at home. And Eze absolutely ran the show, against us. So I wonder, would he come to a team that he ended up smacking up basically when, Ange was the manager at the time. But I agree and subscribe to the theory that Ange would be asking and demanding more than what Thomas Frank would. Do you think they pull the "we tried" BS for both Eze and Kudus?
Potential.
Yeah, we've seen it.
Potential.
Well, last summer, we were expecting a lot more and it didn't come through. We'll see if it plays again this summer, especially with Johan Lange basically being in charge of the transfers for this summer. I think we're getting signs or getting rumors that Paratici will probably take over maybe more after this summer because his consultancy will end or something like that in August, and then like his court cases will be kind of hopefully all finished up by that time as well. So it seems like Paratici is still more in the background than he is actually leading, the front, at the minute. So it's kind of like, I think even Alistair Gold said that it's like it is still Johan Lange's, kind of transfer window.
Do you know what? Half of me thinks, is this pre-planned? And I know. Again, it sounds mad, but right, just think about this. Jack, I hope you're just telling me I'm losing the plot here, right? To be honest, because it calmed me down. But Tottenham knew his ban was up today, right? That he could start going in acting as a director of football. That his ban is up. So why are we giving him a consultancy contract that runs until August? Which means then August, the season's around. When you need Paratici to operate in the market because Johan Lange is a divvy. Do you know what I mean?
Does it feel similar to this?
By design? Honestly, am I crazy? Is it by design? It's fucking madness.
It feels similar to the Steve Hitchen situation, but, before it was like Steve Hitchen was more in the background and then Paratici was taking over. But I think this time I'm praying for the fact that maybe it is Paratici is going to be taking over from Johan Lange, but then Johan Lange is maybe being given one more summer, to, I guess, lead the transfer
my
front.
guessing is, what I'm getting at is Tottenham will leave Paratici in the consultancy role until that contract's finished and then offer him a new contract as a director of football. But if they know his ban was up before that and that he can start coming in and operating and dictating the transfer window on an earlier date, why have we offered him a contract that lasts till August and not let him start on an earlier date as a director of football so we can get this mess sorted? That's my problem.
Maybe to save money on Lange because they brought in Lange for so much money. So then,
mad.
They might be saving money on what they've already asked Johan Lange to do. Lastly, what are your thoughts on not going for both Eze and Kudus? I think we brought up earlier that we want, I think a real ideal window would be to grab someone like a Kudus or an Eze, but then still bring in another, top level forward, or at least another forward that we can maybe be excited by to some degree. I think we did sort of speak on that a bit earlier. What I think is we get one big signing or we get no one. What do you think? Do you agree? I think we're getting at least one big signing, but my fear is that we'll probably not get anything more than, like, if we sign Kudus, I'm not expecting us to sign anyone bigger than that. That's kind of how Spurs usually operate.
Yeah, we won't, but one's not enough.
Yeah. Any more weird dreams, Jack? What are you having for a meal? Here's the thing, like with my dreams and whatnot, it's just I have these crazy dreams all the time, and they're very lucid, and that they're very specific. I wake up, go grab a glass of water, go have a piss, and then I all of a sudden will re-enter the dream right where I pick off, which I think is, maybe some people go through the same thing, but it's quite exhausting actually. And for once, it actually had something to do with football. Usually it has nothing to do with football or sports in general, but this time Antonio Conte was in my dream, and it was a weird one. It was definitely a weird one. It was a bit nightmarish in the sense that, I was supposed to be working for him, and then I was showing up late, so I was worried I was going to get an Antonio Conte red-faced, rant happening to me when I got there. But I think that's when I woke up, actually, was when I actually arrived to the restaurant, to get a scolding. I ended up waking up at that point. And what are you two having for a meal? I'm having some ceviche tonight. I'm making my own little ceviche. Dave, what are you doing?
Honestly, I haven't really eaten meals the last few days, Jack. It's been that fucking warm. I'm surviving off like sandwiches and just picky bits.
Yeah. Well,
I can't. I have a meal and I'm walking around sweating. Fucking, the heat is just so uncomfortable. It's unbearable. So I'm just on picky bits, light bits at the minute. And probably, actually, you can see in my face, I'm better off for it. So
you have to stop licking toads before bedtime, says Nick. Good to see you, Nick. Hopefully you're keeping well, man. You need to have a catch up. THFC till we die. Dermatron with a super chat saying, with Eze, we were nearly there as always. We do all the hard work for clubs to come in and get the players. I'm sick of it and sick of Levy and Enoch. We were 95% there, Dermatron.
See, this is the thing, and again, I don't want you to take me up the wrong way, Dermo, but like you're saying it was 95% done, but every other outlet is saying they never even got into a negotiation phase, that he was on the shortlist and that was it, and that we'll turn our attention to other targets. And this in general is why I have no faith in what people tell me in the transfer market until it's, looks like Fabrizio Romano gives the here we go. Then he's the only person I go, right, he's giving the here we go. This is happening. Apart from that, I don't trust Sky Sports, don't trust any of the journalists or any of that really, because for me, I just think I'm smart enough to know it's all one big rumor mill to keep people interested, keep clicking, and all that sort of shit. So for me, I don't have any faith in what anybody tells me. I've had people come to me, here's some information. Don't want to know. I'm just going to sit back and I'll wait and see what Romano does in that regard, because there's so many conflicting reports. You know what I mean? Honestly, with all the conflicting reports, I could sit here tomorrow and go, Eze is done. And then sit there the next day and go, oh, Spurs haven't even put a bid in for Eze, or, whatever, Eze's going to Arsenal. Honestly, it's absolutely madness. I don't like the transfer window. I think it's a joke, to be honest with you. But big up, Dermatron. Good to see you. And you're not surprised me saying this, because I told you how I feel about the transfer window in general. So big up the Tron. Really appreciate the support, man. And then also Faz Radfar says, big up, lads, my favorite channel. Hope you're all well. Big up, Faz. Yeah, can't
complain. You're enjoying your Hotspur summer, sir.
It's the heat, lad.
Yeah.
It's the heat, lad. Honestly, I'm struggling. Do you know what it is? I think the Americans go, but Dave, it's only a bit of heat. Yeah, but, your places out there are built with aircon, same as Australia, stuff like that. We're not. So when we start getting searing heats, we've got concrete walls with insulation and all that shit. It just stays in. But anyway, that's enough of me complaining.
I think you guys are just wusses. I don't have any aircon, in my place. I think you guys are just wusses, but that's just me. Belgian Hotspur saying, smash a like for these top lads. Thank you, Belgium, my man. Thanks for 15 months of support as well, sir. Hopefully you're enjoying your Hotspur summer as well in Belgium. Lovely place probably to spend the summer. I'd imagine, maybe in Belgium, some of the architecture is a bit better, like Dave is saying, maybe for handling the heat, but also you have those lovely, lovely rivers and I think, just sort of water around, to go swim in and jump in. And of course, the lovely Belgian beers. Then again, though, the Belgian beer is a bit too strong maybe for the summer. They're nice. They're nice and good for the winter, but in the summer, they can be a little too high on the percentage, to handle hot weather, cold beer. Is exactly right, sir. But thanks to everybody in the house for joining us, our weekly panel show. If there's any big news that happens in the next couple of days, we'd be happy to come out with another one, probably around Thursday. Tomorrow is a fan show, so please come on and join us for that one. Talk about, hopefully, again, some big news, or, just talk up the whole 2 hours like you did so excellently last time. So many of you guys that joined me. We're getting a lot of people in for the summer fan show. So if you want to get in on the panel nice and early, recommend that you join the link as soon as you see it, because you might end up, missing out, or you might have to wait for someone to step out. So please, everybody, join us for the fan show tomorrow. I think, that's at the minute, about it. We'll just wait for any other news, to come out as things progress. But thanks to everybody in here with us. Thanks to the likes of Super Spurs, Eugene, Dermatron, Fazzy Radfar, and the Belgian for supporting us in the extra ways, as well as thanks to everybody for joining us this summer evening. Smash a like, please, on your way out. We'll see you next time. And hopefully we get to announce a bomba of some kind, Kudus, whoever it might be, later this week. We'll see you next time, everybody. Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you fucking Spurs.